get ready for the summer. We are starting a new series. And I'm going to get to my notes here because we did a little video thing. The series is called Saturate. And what we're looking at in this series is worship. How many of you guys have been going to church your whole life? Or a large portion of it? Okay. Others of you may not have been. And depending on where you come from, even what church you grew up in and things like that, you will have a different answer to the question, what is worship? So I kind of want to continue the kind of discussion we had a couple weeks ago when we were in the circle and just ask you, when I say the word worship, what do you think of? What? Church? What was that? Music? Okay. Singing? Talents? Okay.
But in the same way, it can be different kinds of music. Because for me, worship is like the old-fashioned hymnals and stuff.
Okay.
But for a lot of people, I know it's like the contemporary
Yep.
music.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So the church has been through what is known as the worship wars, where people say, that's not worship, and then people say, that's not worship, and there's been a lot of conflict on either side about what worship music should sound like. And we're going to talk about that some in this series as well. So what else? Worship. Praise? Praying or praise? Praise? Okay, absolutely. Okay, so I did a little dictionary.com search of what they said worship was. And worship, according to dictionary.com, is adoring reverence or regard. And that doesn't have to be forgot, because in our world, people worship a lot of other things. But it's adoring reverence or regard. So I looked up what is adore or adoration. And adoration is fervent or devoted love. So worship is showing fervent, adoring love and reverence or regard for someone. Okay? And then it goes on, some synonyms are like honor, glorify, or even the root of the word is to show worth. To show what something is worth. So, I'm going to be honest. I am a worship leader, and I've been a worship leader longer than I've been a youth pastor. And when I think about doing a series on worship, it's kind of challenging because it can go in a million different directions, and we can get kind of stuck in some places. So when I decided to do this series, it was like, what are the heart issues? What is the base of what I want to teach people about worship? Because, guys, I believe it's more than music. I believe it's more than a music style. And as we look into Scripture, we're going to see that it's a lifestyle. And as we continue to do that, I'll be honest, when I was growing up and people in the church talked about heaven, and they talked about, heaven is just going to be singing praise to God all the time. And I'm like, that'll get old. I love singing. I'm not the greatest at it, but I enjoy singing. And even thinking about it is like, I'm going to lose my voice because, after Sundays, I lose my voice. And I start thinking about things like that. But guys, as I get to know more of God, I see how we could spend all of our time praising Him and it never get old. Because as I learn more, I realize how little I know and how much more fascinating God is. Guys, I've been in this class and I've been reading about the background and the historical context of the Gospels and proof of the Gospels and things like that. And it's just so fascinating to me that I'm like, re-meeting Jesus once again through this class. And every time I feel like I get to a point where I know most of what there is to know, which sounds kind of arrogant a little bit, but like when you're doing this for a long time and you think you get to a point where you kind of understand things, you see more of God, and then you're back to the beginning and you're like, there's so much more than I ever imagined. And I think, guys, I want to use that definition, adoring reverence, and that's devoted love towards someone. But I also want to, as a moving definition, I want to use these two ideas. And the first one is worship is an outward expression of what's going on the inside. It's an outward expression of an inward surrender or humbling of your heart. And when you start thinking about like the medieval times and things like that, when people came into the presence of royalty, what did they do? They took their hat off, they took off whatever they were wearing, and they knelt down before them. And guys, for this series, I want that idea of kneeling and bowing before a king. I want that to be the mental picture you get as you go forward. Okay, so we're calling this series Saturate. What does it mean to saturate?
To dilute.
Wet.
To dilute? Wet. Okay. What else?
Make something full.
Make something full? Okay. We're getting closer. Anything?
Fill up.
Completely soaked? Okay. I use dictionary.com a lot for this one. And what it says, and I love this definition, I really do. It says to cause a substance to unite with the greatest possible amount of another substance. Think about that in relation to what we want to do in our worship to God. To cause something to unite with the greatest possible amount of another substance. Meaning, when we come in here and they sing, guys, they're not just singing songs. We're trying to fill you with as much of God as you can possibly hold. Okay? So it's more than songs on a screen. It's more than music. It's more than jumping up and down and doing this. We are trying to fill you as much as possible with a God that loves you more than anything. So as we look at this idea of saturation, we want to think about what your life would look like if God completely filled you to the greatest possible amount you can hold. Okay? So that's the question I want you to think about. What would it look like if God saturated your life? How would you be different? How would you think differently? Because I think we can all think of areas in our life where we might be holding back from God a little bit. We might be holding back from allowing that part of our life to be surrendered. And sometimes in worship, we get distracted by the person next to us. And we don't worship. And guys, honestly, I don't believe some of you have a large enough concept of what worship is to do more than just sing in this setting. But I believe that we can get you closer to that by the end of this. So, guys, see these people that come up here and lead worship for you, they work really hard. And they work really hard because they believe in what they're doing. And I believe they believe that what they're doing is more than just music. As a worship leader, I put theology in people's mouths. I put things about God, about their life, and about what I hope they're attempting to do with their life in their mouths. So, as we sing, I don't have time to maintain these regrets when I think about how He loves us. I don't have time to maintain regrets when I think about how much God loves me. I hope you believe that. I hope when we start in this series focusing more on how good God is and focusing more on all the good things and the blessings in your life, I hope that overshadows and eclipses the regrets and the frustrations in your life so much that you don't have time to think about them anymore. That's my goal. Okay? So, to do this, we're kind of basing this whole series around Romans 12, 1 and 2. And this is my picture of worship. So as I try to do my job, as I try to lead other people, this is the idea that I try to work with. And it says, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing. It says, this is your spiritual act of worship. And then it goes on and it says, do not conform any longer to the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Those two verses share so much about Paul's theology and about a picture of worship that we're going to spend this whole time just kind of unpacking what he says there. And before we go on, I read this version of it and I wanted to share it with you. This is from the Message. It's the same two verses, but I want to read this. It says, so here's what I want you to do. God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life. You're sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what he wants from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you. Develops well-formed maturity in you. Okay, so one thing I believe that is true worship requires a level of maturity. It's not something I believe that comes natural when we're converted. Some people have never been in a church service where people worship. Some people have never been to a camp or a convention and seen people jumping around and doing conga lines and things like that. And guys, if you ask people from different places in the church, you'll get a million different answers of what worship is. But what Paul tells us is that offering your bodies as a living sacrifice is your spiritual act of worship. That's pretty heavy, right? So if you want to worship God, give your entire life, right? I couldn't be asking you to do that. Paul couldn't be asking us to give our entire life to God, right? That seems a little extreme. But if I look at Facebook or Instagram or something like that, guess what? I know who you're attracted to very quickly, and so does the rest of the world that sees Facebook and things like that. Because we have no problem posting about our love, right? We have no problem posting about that person that we think about all the time, because when you're attracted to somebody, when you enter into a relationship, that's all you think about, right? That's all you, Damien and Elena? Yeah, right? Hey. I'm just kidding. I see you kind of looking at each other. Like, when you first start in, like, that's all you think about, right? You can't sleep, you can't eat, you got the butterflies every time you think about them and stuff like that. And it's a good feeling, right? And you don't care if everybody else in the world gets tired of hearing about it, right? Let's take another example. How many of you have been friends on Facebook with a new mother? And you scroll down and it's like, picture, picture, picture. This is my baby. Don't care what you think. I'm just going to show him off to the world. Because I don't care what anybody thinks, because this is what I'm thinking about. This is what's on my mind. This is what I care about right now, is this child. So if we see pictures of sporting events, and we see pictures of your dates, and we see pictures of new babies and things like that, why is it so weird to talk about God? Why is it so weird? Why is it so uncommon for us to be excited about our relationship with God? Why is it so uncommon for us to talk about what we do at church with our friends? Why is it so weird if we see someone posting all the time about their relationship with Christ, or about what they're learning, or about things like that? We just don't do it because, we don't want to force our beliefs on someone else. We don't, and there's such a disparity about how we treat, I'm going to go ahead and say, how we treat things we're excited about and God. And guys, what I want to create in this series is excitement about God. So next week we're going to look at the reasons why God deserves our worship. We're going to look at the reasons why we should worship. Because if you notice, and like I said, we're going to break down this verse. It says, therefore, in view of God's mercy. And we all know that if we see therefore in a sentence, we ignore me. We ask what it's there for. Have y'all never heard that? No. Really? When you see therefore, you ask what it's there for. No, that's... The English language hasn't changed that much since I was in school.
Yeah, it kind of has.
I don't think so. Anyway, I blame your teachers because I'm not that old. Okay? So here's the deal.
what you're talking about.
When you see therefore, you ask what it's there for because it's connecting that sentence to something that happened before. And in this circumstance, Paul talks for like 4 chapters about the reasons God is good and the reasons why we can worship and the reasons why we're just not immediately destroyed because we can't meet the requirements of the law. He spends 4 chapters talking about that and says, therefore, in view of God's mercy. So, in view of God's mercy that I've been talking about for these last 4 chapters, this is my argument on which you should offer your bodies as living sacrifice. And one thing that I think is really cool that I've never noticed until this time that I read is, and I just misquoted it because I remember the version I learned, and I think I learned it wrong. But it says to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. So we get a picture of community. We come together to create the sacrifice. So it requires each one of us. So we bring our best to God. And we don't just set aside an hour on Wednesday night or an hour on Sunday morning to worship, but we live a lifestyle of worship. And combined with everybody else that's doing the same thing, we create this living sacrifice to God. And we're going to talk about what it means to be a living sacrifice in this. And I'm so excited about this series, guys. And it goes on. And it says, holy and pleasing. So we're going to look at what that means. And it says, this is your true and proper, this is your spiritual act of worship. So it's Paul telling us how to worship here. And then it goes on and it says, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So the end goal of worship is we'll be able to know God's heart and God's mind. That's what we're going for. We want to be able to know what God is thinking so that we can do those things. And how do we get there? How do we get to that point? It means transforming our minds. How do we transform our minds? By worship. So, I believe in a lot of ways Paul is telling us spiritual growth, spiritual maturity depends on us worshiping. And you're off the hook if you're a person that doesn't like to sing because it's so much more than that. So, guys, this is kind of an introduction to the series. But as we go, I just want to kind of outline. I'm so excited about this. And we're going to be practicing some different styles of worship. And we're going to be talking openly about what comes natural to us worshiping and what is foreign to us. Because, you know, I traveled in the band and we went to some churches and they went crazy. like it was so uncomfortable for me because people started speaking in tongues and things like this. And I was like, not sure what you're saying. Not sure this is completely biblical. And I don't know how to take this. And then we went into others and it was like, where's the casket? You know, this feels like a funeral. And things like that. So we went all across the spectrum. And the beautiful thing, the thing that unites is it's a humbling of our heart. So however we can humble our heart, we can worship. So I believe some people worship through sports. I believe that's a possibility. I believe some people worship through sports. I believe some people want to be worshipped through sports. And I think once again, it's an attitude of your heart that makes the difference. I believe some people worship through singing. I believe some people want to be worshiped because of their talent. You know, so we're going to look at this idea of worship. So, as we close tonight, I'd like to know, we've talked about what worship is. What's confusing about worship to you guys? I want to kind of get a basis for where we're going. What are the things that's like, that doesn't really make sense to me? Or if everything's worship, then nothing's worship. You know, that kind of idea that worship needs to be something special. Like, is there anything that's on your heart, your mind as we move forward? I'm guessing since the therefore thing, you're not going to say anything. But I want bless you. I want to give opportunity. Okay, so the way we're going to end tonight is I want you to take some time to think about what I asked you earlier. What would it look like if your life was completely saturated with Jesus? How would your conversations be different? How would your attitude be different? How would your interactions with other people? How would your demeanor or your leadership in an athletic event be different? How would how you act on Wednesday nights be different? How would how you act on Sunday morning be different?